tangent. It had nothing to do with anything we're doing. So anyway, we did home, we did solid, surfaces and mesh we just talked a little bit about, which brings us to visualize. So visualize has a few things that we've already taken a look at. It has the 3D navigation views, which are in line with your cube. Okay, so this is another way to get to them. Top, bottom, left, right. You're going to notice all these are kind of similar. Southwest isometric. These are all the corners at the bottom. These are all the planes at the top. So that's just another access to that. View manager is exactly what it sounds like. Then we have all of these guys again in coordinates. So this little tool palette, they just carry it right over, right? Viewport configuration, which we don't really need, but it can split. Remember the first couple weeks where we did like single viewport for our template, but I said you could also break it into 4 if you wanted to have like multiple views in one sheet of paper. So there's that. Brings us back to views, visual styles, which we talked a little bit about already. So finally, these tools right here are what we're going to focus on. Next week, I'm going to do lighting because I think it's a little overwhelming. Specifically, lighting is a little overwhelming to put in the same day as the rest of this, okay? Because you're learning like all of these modify commands like sweep, loft, revolve, you know, material application. Then it's like, oh, and one more thing to remember. So I'm going to do that next week, and I'll give you a timeline here in just a minute of what's going on. But there's some properties. And finally, materials. So let me just expand this for you so you can see all of this. So the one that we're going to do on Visualize today is Material Browser. It's going to open a fairly compressed palette. You're going to notice that this guy is, in my opinion, it's kind of hard to look at. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to grab it. Unlike most windows, this actually has the banner on the side. So if you grab it by the left side, that gray stripe, you can slide this guy around. Okay. So Materials Browser, and I'm just going to slide this more towards the middle, just so I can look at it for a second. Did I lose anybody on any of that? Material. You go to Visualize.
Yep.
Material Browser.
You are
Top row.
Visualize.
Visualize really. Good.
Yeah, I had my half screens.
Yeah. Everybody good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So like I said, I'm going to drag this guy over, and then if you go to the side of this thing, you're going to see my double arrow kind of appear here. See that, dude? And I'm just going to stretch this. Just like, this is like a fairly standard Windows operation.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going to stretch this guy out. And then if you notice, it has several rows, name, type, category. Those are also fairly compressed. So I'm just going to click on the little divider between them. And again, I'm going to get that double arrow. I'm just going to click and slide that so I can read the names. Did I lose anybody on that one? Okay. So you don't have to do all that, but I think it's a little easier to read, especially the first time when you're like thumbing through these things to see what they are. So these are all preloaded materials. And if you are super ambitious, you will know that you can also find a lot of this stuff online. I don't think that surprises anybody. But Autodesk makes a ridiculous amount of materials, and it preloads a bunch of them. But there are others out there. Okay? Other Autodesk programs have them. Some people have made their own. So if you search AutoCAD materials, it'll actually come up with volumes. I mean, you could spend the better part of the day looking at those things. Okay. So if what you find here doesn't satisfy you, you can always load those, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But for now, I think that there is a pretty good supply of these guys. So you're going to notice the default kind of loads you with all these like ceramic tiles, masonry blocks, all that stuff. And as you scroll down, you can see that there's more. There's wall coverings, floorings, metals, wood, blah, blah, blah. This list is kind of cumbersome to flip through, okay? If you look, each one has not only a name, but a type and a category. And you can sort these guys if you go to this little triangle next to home. If you click that, it's going to rotate and it's going to expand that menu out. And the first thing it's going to do is go to your favorites, which for this you probably don't have any. But the next one is going to say that you have this Autodesk library. And again, if you click the little triangle and expand it, here's all the categories. And I think that this is a lot more efficient as far from a user standpoint to like, look, hey, I want flooring. I'm going to go to flooring. Or
You can also
I
click
want
on the
metal.
word. You can also click on the word type and we'll put it in
Right.
alphabetical order.
Yep. Okay. So if you're looking like, hey, I just made a table lamp and I want metal, I can go to metal. Okay. And then it has the cast, it has the anodized aluminum, brushed nickel, all that cool stuff. And you can actually rotate any of these that have the little triangle, have subcategories that you can then expand out. So you can see that I have steel, I have fabricated metals, which is kind of miscellaneous, and then I have specifically aluminum. So if I click on any of those, then it kind of even drills that down further
Granite,
to be,
marble.
yep, so any of the stone is same deal, granite and marble for that. Wood, it gets into panels, which is specific to like wall paneling, versus if you go up to flooring, wood, this is floor paneling. So all it really is scale, which we'll talk about here in a second. You can kind of think of, if I have a wall, usually the panel I put up there is much larger than if I have a section of floor. So like, it just scales it appropriately. It's the same like wood, but if you're like, oh, this looks so funny, it's probably because the scale's a little off. Because it shows it from,
walls.
you could do whatever you want. The sky's the limit, man. It's like a, yeah, do granite walls.
I could like design a house.
I don't foresee anyone building a granite wall house, but you know,
I mean,
the sky's the limit here.
I'm just saying, like, if I wanted to, I could make a house in here and then like be like, hey, I want to build this house and then use that.
You absolutely could. Yep.
That's fucking awesome.
So let's talk a little bit about application of these guys. So does anybody have questions about the materials? Okay. So the important part to note about this is that these are your materials available. Okay. Up here is your material use library. And you're going to notice that this is actually like a split screen, and you can drag. You may want to try that just for general knowledge. Is that you can expand that. All I'm going to do is hover on the line, and you know, by default it's kind of compressed, but as you start putting things on, which you'll see here in a minute, it's going to actually add more and more to this. Right now, all I have is my good friend Global Generic, right? So we'll see that guy in just a second. Yeah, what's that?
If I wanted to, is there any way to like make a new material?
Yeah, that's. I'm not going over that though. It's fairly complicated. I can show you individually. So, here's this. Ready? I want, let's say, American Cherry. So I'm going to drag this. I'm going to click and drag it from my available library to my use library. You can see that it just pops up here. Drag that a little bit bigger so you can see it as well. And you can do that with whatever. It doesn't have to be American Cherry. That just happens to be what I was on. Okay. So grab one of those and drag it up to your use library. So I want you to see this because this is traditionally how people get really frustrated with their files. These computers are fair. I wouldn't say they're the top, I wouldn't say they're the bottom, they're kind of somewhere in the middle. But I'll tell you right now, if you start piling a whole bunch of materials on a whole bunch of objects, you're gonna think this is the worst computer in the whole world. Because for every one of these things, it has to generate a pattern, a materials scale, a materials density for the properties, and then it has to apply those materials. And that really takes a lot of memory on a graphics card. So if you keep loading them from the available library directly to the objects, it will populate this usage library, and this file is going to get really slow. Okay? So my suggestion is, if there is something here that you really like, and you want it on multiple items, that you put it in your usage library, and then apply it to the item. Okay, I'll show you exactly what I mean here in a second.